said they still held on to the hope, however slim, that the new White House chief of staff, John F. Kelly, could impose order on the disarray even as Mr. Trump hopscotches from one self-destructive episode to the next. Mr. Kelly, who watched the president's performance on Tuesday with his head hung low, grimacing at some of Mr. Trump's remarks, is frustrated, according to people inside the White House. Several people who participated in White House conference calls over the weekend said Mr. Kelly initially did not seem to fully grasp the effect of the controversy about the president's remarks. But as a former Marine, Mr. Kelly is determined to try to bring order to the White House, the officials said. The White House turmoil intensified as friends and relatives gathered to memorialize Heather Heyer, the woman who was struck and killed on Saturday. But Susan Bro, Ms. Hayer's mother, told worshippers that her daughter had been protesting hated by the nationalist groups when she was killed by one of them. They tried to kill my child to shut her up, but guess what? You just magnified her, Ms. Bro said. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, denounced hate and bigotry in a statement on Wednesday but made no mention of Mr. Trump or his comments, an example of the careful line that some Republican officials are treading as they hope to work with the president on a conservative agenda in the months to come. Leaders of the Republican Jewish coalition were more direct, telling on Mr. Trump to provide greater moral clarity in rejecting racism, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. They added, there are no good Nazis and no good members of the Klan. Thankfully, in modern America, the KKK and Nazis are small fringe groups that have never been welcome in the GOP. Of the Army, David Shelkin, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, delivered an emotional statement to reporters on Wednesday at Mr. Trump's private golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, where the president is vacationing. Treading carefully without chiding Mr. Trump, Mr. Shelkin said, well, I'm speaking out and I'm giving my personal opinion as an American and as a Jewish American. And for me in particular, I think in learning history that we know that staying silent on these issues is simply not acceptable. Paraphrasing famous words from Martin Niemöller, a German pastor and a vocal critic of Adolf Hitler, Mr. Shelkin said, first, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't speak out. Then they came for the Jews. I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't speak out. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. Many other Jewish members of the Trump administration remained largely silent on Wednesday, even after the protesters in Charlottesville had chanted anti-Semitic slogans and named the president's Jewish son-in-law, Mr. Kushner. Stephen Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, who is also Jewish, stood silently behind Mr. Trump on Tuesday as the president said there were very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville. Mr. Mnuchin has not said anything publicly about the president's remarks. Mr. Kushner has been silent about Mr. Trump's comments. I've Trump, who converted to Judaism, said in a tweet on Sunday, there should be no place in society for racism, white supremacy and neo-Nazis. Michael D. Cohen, the president's longtime personal lawyer, who is Jewish, denounced hate groups but defended Mr. Trump in response to a reporter's question on Wednesday. I know President Trump in his heart, Mr. Cohen wrote, he is a good man and doesn't have a racist bone in his body. Viewed as political correctness in favor of a take-no-prisoners attack on the out-left. On Wednesday, even Fox News, a favorite of the president's, repeatedly carried criticism of Mr. Trump. One Fox host, Shepard Smith, said that he had been unable to find a single Republican to come on air to defend Mr. Trump's remarks. No one from the president's team has resigned as of yet, but some spoke candidly on Wednesday about whether they could continue to work much longer for a man who has expressed such sentiments. Most incensed among Mr. Trump's top advisers, according to three people familiar with the situation, was Gary D. Cohn, the director of the National Economic Council, who told people around him that he was offended, as a Jew and as an American, by the president's reaction to the violence in Charlottesville. The relationship between the president and Mr. Cohn, who stood next to Mr. Trump during the news conference, seems to have suffered a serious blow. Although White House aides denied that he was planning to quit, they acknowledged that Mr. Cohn, a former Goldman Sachs executive, was upset with the president's lack of discipline. One aide who felt energized by the president's actions was the embattled White House chief strategist, Stephen K. Bannon, who shares Mr. Trump's anger at the efforts of local governments to remove monuments honoring prominent Confederate figures like Robert E. Lee. The proposed removal of a Lee statue on the University of Virginia campus in Charlottesville spurred the demonstrations last weekend. Mr. Bannon, whose future in the White House remains uncertain, has been encouraging Mr. Trump to remain defiant. Two White House officials who have been trying to moderate the president's position suggested that Mr. Bannon was using the crisis as a way to get back in the good graces of the president, who has soured on Mr. Bannon's internal machinations and reputation for leaking stories about West Wing rivals to conservative news media outlets. Many in the White House said they still held on to the hope, however slim, that the new White House Chief of Staff, John F. Kelly, could impose order on the disarray even as Mr. Trump hopscotches from one self-destructive episode to the next. Mr. Kelly, who watched the president's performance on Tuesday with his head hung low, grimacing at some of Mr. Trump's remarks, is frustrated, according to people inside the White House. Several people who participated in White House conference calls over the weekend said Mr. Kelly initially did not seem to fully grasp the effect of the controversy about the president's remarks. But as a former Marine, Mr. Kelly is determined to try to bring order to the White House, the officials said. The White House turmoil intensified as friends and relatives gathered to memorialize Heather Heyer, the woman who was struck and killed on Saturday. Susan Bro, Miss Hayer's mother, told worshippers that her daughter had been protesting hatred by the nationalist groups when she was killed by one of them. "They tried to kill my child to shut her up, but guess what, you just magnified her," Miss Bro said. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, denounced hate and bigotry in a statement on Wednesday but made no mention of Mr. Trump or his comments. An example of the careful line that some Republican officials are treading as they hope to work with the president on a conservative agenda in the months to come. Leaders of the Republican Jewish coalition were more direct, calling on Mr. Trump to provide greater moral clarity in rejecting racism, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. They added, "There are no good Nazis and no good members of the Klan." Thankfully, in modern America, the KKK and Nazis are small fringe groups that have never been welcome in the G.O.P. David Shulkin, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, delivered an emotional statement to reporters on Wednesday at Mr. Trump's private golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, where the president is vacationing. Treading carefully without chiding Mr. Trump, Mr. Shulkin said, "Well, I'm speaking out, and I'm giving my personal opinions as an American and as a Jewish American. And for me in particular, I think in learning history, that we know that staying silent on these issues is simply not acceptable." Paraphrasing famous words from Martin Niemöller, a German pastor and a vocal critic of Adolf Hitler, Mr. Shulkin said, "First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't speak out. Then they came for the Jews. I wasn't a Jew so I didn't speak out. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me." Many other Jewish members of the Trump administration remained largely silent on Wednesday, even after the protesters in Charlottesville had chanted anti-Semitic slogans and demeaned the president's Jewish son-in-law, Mr. Kushner. Stephen Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, who is also Jewish, stood silently behind Mr. Trump on Tuesday as the president said there were very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville. Mr. Mnuchin has not said anything publicly about the president's remarks. Mr. Kushner has been silent about Mr. Trump's comments. Ivanka Trump, who converted to Judaism, said in a tweet on Sunday, "There should be no place in society for racism, white supremacy and neo-Nazis." Michael D. Cohen, the president's longtime personal lawyer, who is Jewish, denounced hate groups but defended Mr. Trump in response to a reporter's question on Wednesday. "I know President Trump in his heart," Mr. Cohen wrote. "He is a good man and doesn't have a racist bone in his body.